Hey guys, and thanks for watching Smart Money Minds. My name is Ben, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the hot new big topic of marijuana stocks and the top 7 things that you need to watch out for when you invest. Marijuana stocks have been up and booming, and with the legalization of cannabis in Canada and in various states in the United States, some parts of the world have also been allowing medicinal marijuana to be dispensed, and the growth of the cannabis industry is expected to hit $16.9 billion in 2019 alone, and also $31.3 billion by 2022. Some cannabis company stock prices have jumped to over 3,000% in growth in the last 2 years alone. If you look at the likes of Canopy Growth or Kronos Group, if you put in $1,000 into one of those stocks 2 years ago, it would now be worth $30,000 possibly. The more it is decriminalized and possibly made legal recreationally, the more the industry might end up to become a giant like the alcohol industry with the likes of Molson Canadian or Heineken. And if you ever consider investing into the cannabis market, here are 7 things you need to watch out for to give you a competitive edge in investing in this volatile market. One of the biggest factors is the legality of cannabis in many countries. And if you take a look, the only country that is fully legalized medically and recreationally is Canada, and it only has a population of 37 million people. But if you look at the United States, they have 327 million people, and it's still illegal on a federal level. And with each state opening up to their own state rules about legalization of cannabis, more and more millions of people are joining in and participating in this drug, and the US is most likely going to be the next candidate to federally legalize this drug. Other major countries like the UK or Australia or India are all way behind on the scene on this. So make sure you keep an eye out on the election in 2020 and who's supporting the passing of bills and supporting cannabis use in general. Keep your eye out on banking bills that allow cannabis companies easier access to institutional money like banks. And so it's easier for them to borrow or loan money to different companies or different banks. And that way it will help the industry in general. Also, keep an eye out for state changes in decriminalization of marijuana. And with that, companies that are based in major population, that is in Texas or Florida or California, will get a giant profit boost due to these state changes alone. Second thing we want to look into is major investments or partnerships with established companies like alcohol giants. If you look at August 2018, a major alcohol giant called Constellation, what they did was they invested $4 billion into Canopy Growth, which is a marijuana company, and that shot that stock price 30% up overnight. We want to look at potential drink companies, supermarkets, or alcohol companies wanting to step in and get a share of this new emerging market. Think about Coca-Cola. Maybe they want a CBD drink that they want to establish. Maybe Walmart wants to open a dispensary in their own stores. Or maybe like some alcohol and weed combination drinks. We gotta think of all these combinations and interesting partnerships that are gonna come up, and so it's worthwhile for us to keep an eye on this sort of news. Number 3 thing we want to watch out for is buyouts from major cannabis companies. Now that Canada has established itself as a spearhead as cannabis legalization, there's a lot of successful companies up there that are already established and want to expand their foothold into other countries. And they're the most well-financed and also have government backing. So they want to look into expanding into the United States, looking into the UK, Australia, other major countries that haven't even started this process yet. Well-established Canadian cannabis companies are looking to expand their foothold, and they're looking to buy out weaker and smaller companies in the States or all around the world that need some funding. And so if you look at it recently, an example would be Canopy Growth buying out Acreage. And they're not buying it out right now. What they're doing is they're waiting until the US is federally legal until they do this buyout. As these larger cannabis companies start gobbling up smaller ones all around the world, they're going to help the share price of these smaller companies that are not so well established, have limited funding, and a big giant comes in and gives them all that they need to, and also builds them a system for distribution and growth, and that way it's going to drive their stock prices up, and that's going to help shareholders that are invested in those smaller companies. Our fourth thing that we have to look at is just the overall health of the economy. As the cannabis industry is still a politically touchy subject, it's still considered very risky for some investors to get into. One rule can change how the industry operates and just how companies operate in general. So because of this inherent risk, this is a potential high risk, high reward sector. The health of the economy is important because if normal stocks, industries, and tech are all doing well, people feel like they can take on a little bit more risk, and they feel more comfortable and more wealthy. And however, if people are losing jobs, they can't pay for their house, they're, losing money in the stocks that they trust, then how is anybody going to believe in the marijuana market? How are they going to believe that it's going to make money for them? And people are more likely to pull their market out of these stocks and put them into traditionally safe securities like bonds or gold. The health of the economy is going to allow the cannabis industry to thrive. And so it's always important to look for signs of weakness in the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones, because if those are going down, then the cannabis industry is likely to be weak as well. The fifth thing we want to look into is international legalization and company expansions to other countries. Think about it. The biggest countries in the world with the most population, India and China, haven't even touched this drug yet. They represent almost 30% of the world population. Other first world countries like Germany and the UK and Australia are just starting to use marijuana as a medical drug. And with these markets being extremely young, and there's established players in Canada and the United States, they'll look to expand and move into these new emerging markets and these countries. And give it 5 to 10 years down the road, cannabis could possibly be legal worldwide, just like how alcohol generally is legal in 90% of the world. The number 6 thing to watch is the uplisting of smaller cannabis companies into the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. A lot of these companies are operating in the OTC, which is the over-the-counter, or on the Canadian side, TSX Ventures. So these are not regulated markets, and anybody can uplist into those sectors. But for a stock to get into the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, they have to be much higher regulated. These companies have to meet certain qualifications in order to be uplisted in these exchanges. And if you look at companies like OGI or VFF or TRST, all these names are uplisting and they're getting a bump in interest and their stock price because people are seeing these companies as being more legitimate, and people want to see that these companies are being audited and they're being regulated, and thus have more confidence in these companies, and thus leads to increase in prices in their stocks. And the number 7 thing to watch out for is share dilution at all-time highs or close to all-time highs to pay for some expenses. One thing to watch closely for is for share dilutions with smaller companies. Share dilution means that the company needs to issue more shares and raise more money for the company issuing these shares. And this means that every share out there that they have right now, it means that they are worth a little bit less. And this is negative news for people. By increasing the supply of shares, people are less confident in your shares, and thus your share prices will drop. And this is either temporary or long-term, depending on how people react to this sort of news. Cannabis companies have to do this in order to pay for a lot of their overhead costs, and especially in this unpredictable and unknown marketplace, a lot of companies are still losing money short term because of political uncertainty. Companies dilute their shares, especially when there's hype in the market. They wait for a time when it's all-time high, and then they dilute the shares. It's almost like a kid asking for allowance when it's their parents' payday. They're betting that people are in a good mood and won't react harshly to this sort of news and this sort of requests. This is what happens when a company announces dilution. So you have to watch out for the hype and euphoria of the sector, because that could lead to a lot of downside if you're not careful and you're just thinking that it's gonna keep going up forever. So with all these 7 things to watch, you still gotta remember that this industry is very boom and bust. There's going to be a lot of companies going up thousands of percentages, and some companies are going to go bankrupt. Actually, a lot of companies are going to go bankrupt, and that could be your money invested in that company that you lose as well. So you really have to be careful and watch what you're doing with this market and not risk all your money into it, because you could lose a lot and you have to be very careful. In the comments below, let me know if you're interested in investing in cannabis stocks. If you're already in some, what are you in right now? And are there any other indicators other than the 6 things that I just talked about that you look for? And let me know in the comment section, because I'd like to know too. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button, and like this video, and we'll see you next time.